you.
Aye.
Do we have any public comment? Okay. We're going to move right on to old business. And Brent Hassett was coming in to do an update, but I was able to meet with him last week, and we had a really nice long meeting about what's going on and what the goals and the plans for 2014 with our legislative agenda. And pretty much the long and short of it, we were questioned. This is where I was kind of going with it, if anyone was at executive. We had kind of some questions about what exactly Brent Hassett is and Julie Curry, what have they been doing? What is going on that we have the lobbyist that's down in Springfield? Because if you look, with our agenda, there's, a few things that have gotten through. Even though, if you look at the track record between the quick take that we had over there on Weber, and then as well as it was the sheriff's, that we've had a couple bills that have made it. The one thing, and a lot of you know, and a lot who just kind of was curious, it's not even just about getting these bills through, it's getting these bills blocked that aren't getting through. That is going to go ahead and hurt onto our county. And we're a lot of, where Brent and Julie are out there, and they're all ears and they're keeping eyes, and they're keeping track of these bills. So that is kind of where Brent and I were, where we went through each and every one of these agenda items. And the one that right now that we really have an eye on that we were talking about was, in fact, the quarry, the clean air construction and demo debris. So that's right now where Brent and Julie are at, of getting the language and getting that out, and then getting a sponsor for that bill. So that's going to be hopefully an update on that, and soon. I was asking when that will come. They're not going to have session, I think, one day in the end of January, and then February. I was talking with Representative Sanger last night and Senator Connolly, and we were kind of discussing what their schedule is going to be, and they said, when they have these with the primaries, there's not going to be a lot of session. They're not going to be in session a lot. It's going to be more probably packed, and Don and Lee could probably kind of chime in on that. They're going to have a lot more probably after the primary. They'll be a little bit more like in April or in May.
Yeah, and also early in session, they really pretty much stick to the Tuesday, Thursday schedule.
So right now, like I said, the big thing, we could, we're not going to go over the whole agenda, but the one thing that we really centered on, we talked quite some time about, was the clean air construction.
Well, what page is that on in the federal agenda?
That's the state.
It was the state agenda.
That's the monitor, groundwater monitor.
Yeah, I have the draft that we have as well, if you want to go.
Oh, I do have it. Thank you.
Okay.
I was just looking
Good.
at it.
Yeah, no,
So I didn't see it. Thank you.
No, and we did not, we're getting more so, we were talking about, of course, with Julie, talking about the state agenda.
Suzanne, I had a question.
Yes.
We never talked about it, but it occurred to me because I had some Democratic state reps asking me questions about it from Moore County here. And besides our own Republican guys, there's a problem where the state creates rules and regulations with their codes, like building codes and things like that. And the elected officials don't even know what they're voting. They pass it, and then it becomes a law, and then we at Will County, we have to follow the law that's mandated down by the state. And do we ever talk about watching what they're passing and then making sure that they're passing stuff that's not going to overburden businesses from coming here, or new construction of homes? Because like, I just use an example, that energy code thing. If you want to replace a window, you have to get a permit because you have a certain energy code. And when you get businesses moving in here, and they start looking at all the different rules and regulations, like they're going to say, why should I come here? I'll go over the border to Indiana, where I don't have as much restrictions, because every year they seem to increase with the restrictions. And they're not really thought out as far as individuals and businesses.
Well, because I know, and Brent and Julie both, of keeping an eye on anything that and I love when Lee comes to these because I have to look and cross-reference for her, our expert here, of anything that is going to go pass through that will infect onto the county. But if there's something that we need to go
So
and highlight.
we don't know when this stuff's going through because I've asked all these governor candidates on the Republican side why they voted for this stuff, and they didn't even know that it was the law.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it was maybe stepped
You know,
into
I mean,
another-
so I'm just trying to say, if we were watching it, if there's something that's coming up that's gonna be real costly for businesses to build here or to stay here, you know, we should be watching that and then trying to prevent it from not changing the thing, but blocking it.
But Nick, did you have a?
Well, just the only thing I'll add, having worked on staff down there, is, I mean, there's a lot of bills. Julie and Brett and our legislators all try to monitor them, but things like building codes, I know that in addition to our efforts, people like Tom Joseph with the Realtors Association, they're watching for those because they'll let us know. Because if it's increasing the cost for housing construction, that hurts their business too. So I'm sure if it's something like that, you probably get a call from them saying, hey, you guys should oppose this or whatever. But it is, I mean, it's when there's thousands of bills introduced at the beginning, and some of them, the sponsors know that they're not going anywhere. It's just so they can say, for a certain constituency, I introduced this bill and it got shut down. Sorry. You know, I mean, the bills that have the support are the ones that are going to get through. But I think you're right. We have to be vigilant and continue to monitor and not just go to one source, but talk to other people too.
Ray said from our building department that the energy code is really outrageous as far as cost. And, you know, that's from our guys. You know, and I'm thinking, so I asked the question, how did we get this thing if it's so outrageous in cost? You know, what do we have to do to change it? And so that's where I'm bringing it up, because as you go year to year to year, they keep adding on. And that gets to the point where the baseline was in 2002, and then every year they added more on. Now it's new, and people are still thinking it's 2002 rules. They're not realizing the change to the new 2012, like the international code is 2012.
You had a great point though about Tom Joseph. I'm telling you, if there's anything that would go in.
But
It's
not only home builders
We'll hear it.
where we got to worry about it. It's about, we're going to lose businesses at a certain point when they realize the cost involved. You know, like, it turns out that the state can't even tell me, because I've got 3 state legislators working on trying to let me know about whether fire departments have the authority to create laws that say you have to have sprinkler systems. And, you know, that's a big deal, but it's a bigger deal for businesses than it is for a home. You know, so.
I just kind of wanted to pick up on what Nick was saying, in that there are literally thousands, not one or two, but thousands of bills that are introduced at the state level alone, each and every session. And that the lobbyists that we hire are basically looking out for the interests of the county, but within the county, of course, there's the sheriff department, the courts,
Assessor's office,
you know,
everything, there's so much.
right, there's so much that we have to depend on the other, like Tom Joseph, or like the home builders, or like the Sheriff's Association, to you know, come to us and say, you know, this is something that's bad for Will County, and so, you know, if the legislative committee could oppose it, and then we can try to keep an eye on those bills. But I mean, there are literally thousands of bills, some that will never see the light of day, and then some that will just overnight pick up steam.
And we only have 2 lobbyists down there. We have Julie and Brent. Now, and I was kind of saying this again when we were talking at executive, what I had found, I heard, and then I kind of did a little digging with DuPage County, and I still can't believe this, that they have, the board has their lobbyist, the chairman has lobbyists. Each and every one of the county-wides, and the executive office and everyone, they each have a lobbyist. So the executive has the clerk has their own lobbyist. So we have two at $48,000.
Well, I'm not saying you can find all of them.
Right, but but DuPage County spends $500,000 on lobbyists. So when now I understand why DuPage is so
See, we're
strong,
getting a
powerful.
lot of intermodal, big giant warehouse buildings, and the cost to put sprinklers in there is outrageous. I don't want to continue on with it, but there's a point when they won't find the value of being in a hub as opposed to the cost of building the building.
Well, no, we definitely,
We gotta avoid that point.
Stephen, without a doubt, that seems like something that we maybe need to sit down, maybe with Tom Joseph and with our lobbyists, and to be able to go ahead and get a radar on that.
And also, just want to comment that out of 26 county board members we have here in Will County, we do have an advantage. We have people, you keep looking at Leanne Goodson, because we do have an advantage having her. She's worked with State Rep Tom Cross for many years, and we have an ear to what goes on in Springfield. We have people like Bob Howard, Don Moran. There's so many others that are connected with us here in Will County. And Tom Joseph, you mentioned, that keeps us in tune. As was said, hundreds of bills go through that. Nobody can possibly keep up with all of them. But things that are important to us, Steve, I think we have an advantage here in Will County because we have so many people that go to Springfield, work for some of the reps, and keep us in tune. And so that nothing really slips by our attention that really should catch our attention. So we have some advantages here that I don't think that a whole lot of the counties in the state of Illinois have, like we do in Will County. And then we have you, Steve. That's always a part of it.
Nothing's gonna get
Nothing gets past you.
I'll take that as a compliment.
There's one in there somewhere.
That's why I said I'll take it.
Well, I also wanted to add one other thing, and that's a matter of perspective and values too. I think what looks like a pig to one person to Kermit might look like Miss Piggy. Very attractive. And so, and I agree with you, like putting sprinklers in single-family homes is probably an outrageous expense to put into home cost of homes, but maybe putting sprinklers into certain types of businesses is something that in the long term is probably something that's cost-effective. It's arguable. But certain cost-effective things when it comes to energy savings in the longer term, requiring certain types of equipment might be more cost-effective in the longer term, but upfront it's a very expensive thing. So we have to debate as to whether or not that's something of value to do, to require a business to do. So depends on who's the advocate on certain issues as to who thinks it's too expensive, who thinks it's cost-effective. So I wouldn't just accept that particular entity's argument that it's not worthwhile. There's lots of economics involved in these kinds of things. So, and depending upon the lobbyist too, who's involved in this. So
I was just pointing out that it gets stricter and stricter, and right now, okay, we're getting businesses to come here and everything's okay, but if there's a point in time where things are broke, it's too strict, and then people say, well, why should we come here? It's more advantageous business-wise to be here, but the cost of doing business is too high. We can't make the profit we can by moving to Indiana. And all I'm saying is if we keep an eye on it, if we were watching close, maybe we'd be able to prevent it from getting to that point. You know what I'm saying?
I'm just saying we have a lot of eyes that are watching.
Yeah, I understand that. I just brought it up.
Right.
No, thank you, Stephen. That's exactly what this committee is about. Really quick, because I'm going to kind of veer, because we do still have, not everyone wants it, but we do, with the airport, there was a meeting yesterday that I know that you had gone to over the university. Did you want it, Don, can you give an update really quick on what that was about?
It was a meeting for public officials, any public officials, and the Illinois Department of Transportation came in and gave a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, explaining how the public outreach is going to work, what the status is on property purchases, and one thing they did say is, even though they have quick take on the airport, and just part of Senate Bill 20 or previous to that. They said they're not going to exercise quick take anywhere in Will County on a project that won't start construction within the next 12 months.
Oh, that's great.
So,
That's wonderful.
so it's a little bit less onerous maybe. They talked about how many properties they have in the base footprint. There was a little debate from Congresswoman Kelly's office about what the length of the runways need to be, and IDOT has taken that under advisement, but they have to also satisfy what the FAA and their master airport plan makes them provide a plan for what's going to happen today, the day they open, for 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And right now, the master plan is only justified by building a certain length of runway. And 20 years from now, that runway could be 5,000 feet longer than what it is under initial construction, but not right out the box.
Right now, it's 9,500.
And I took some issue with some of the things that I read from the Congressman's office said about where the majority of cargo transportation takes place. He said it's all 747s and long haul stuff that's going to China or something like that. He's right about probably, but the majority of cargo transportation in this country is domestic, and it's done in the holds of passenger aircraft and small packages. And so I don't know. There's pros and cons about that, I guess. And but it really it was more or less familiarization with who the people are, the key people are going to be at IDOT, and who the public officials should reach out to, and how the outreach program is going to do. So they're going to start holding public meetings. I think their next public meeting is they're meeting with the Will Grundy building trades on the, I don't know the date now. It was going to be on the 22nd. They changed it, so it didn't fit the schedule for someone who was going to come from IDOT or something. So it's sometime near the end of the month. Going to meet with the building trades, and then they're going to reach out. They're going to reach out to other entities. They said churches. They said all kinds of people.
I don't know why the churches.
They did say that.
They did say it.
I don't feel good.
Right, right.
But anyway, they had you know, a nice slideshow they showed of what property you purchased and all that. And
Was Judy at the?
no, Judy was not at the meeting. Judy sent a question via the
Yes.
speaker.
I brought up her question. Yeah. You'll be proud of me, Suzanne. I did.
Always.
But
I'm
it's,
okay.
the actual inaugural footprint of what they need to purchase in order to finish the plan and to actually start construction of the airport property. I was told yesterday that there's only 4 outstanding parcels.
Really?
That doesn't include the road going in from off of I-57, but the airport proper, where the runway, the terminal, the parking ramps, and that's the initial runway in. There's 4 parcels left, and that they haven't already either purchased or are in condemnation proceedings with.
And how many acres is that at this point?
Well, the total inaugural footprint, which includes the road out to the highway, is 5,830 acres or something, right? And they own over 3,000 right now. But some of these, but they don't need that whole amount to actually proceed forward with the airport stuff. So they're working the Tier 2 environmental study parallel to the air study by the FAA. Those two things are running concurrent with each other. When the FAA finishes the air study, then they'll take that air study that gets added into the Tier 2, and the FAA will finish the Tier 2. So IDOT is providing staffing to the FAA and funding to help them proceed quicker with the process of exercising the air study.
So what's their best case scenario for approval at this point?
Construction might start as early as 2016.
But the approval would
They
come.
will be 2015.
Wow.
Everything was moving. They had about 3,300 acres purchased, I think it was. And they said everything was just moving very well.
Were you happy with the meeting? I mean, it sounded like Will County was definitely.
Very well.
It was good. There was quite a few of the mayors, the Iron Ring mayors were there, the managers were there. there was a lot of people from, there was a lot of state reps there. Kay Clunan was there, Al Riley was there, Harris was there, who else was there?
Larry Jr.,
Larry Jr. was there.
McGuire, Pat was
Pat
there.
McGuire was there. And
I can't remember.
those representatives that didn't make it, a lot of them sent staffers
Right.
to sit in on the meeting yesterday, so. They talked about, one question was asked, you asked about the township roads.
Is that what Judy?
Right.
Okay, there's 85 miles of township roads that'll end up getting closed in the total airport footprint, not, you know. And I remember I was involved in when the state purchased the property for Sparta, the shooting range down by St. Louis. And I was involved in that initial process. And they bought the land for like $1 from the ag producers to produce just the World Shooting Complex, where they have this big shotgun thing twice a year. And one of the most difficult things that they had to do there was get the township road commissioners to relinquish their rights to the roads and that property. The state couldn't take possession of it until they relinquished their rights to get it clear title. So I imagine that there would be a lot of negotiation. IDOT indicated that there would be, when it gets to that point, there will be a lot of negotiations with the townships to try and make them whole. So.
Great, so.
Nick and Alicia was there also.
Nick's everywhere.
Yeah.
There's two of him, I know he's got a twin, he's just not telling his mother. Okay, any other old business? I guess that would be it. We do not have our guest. We're gonna go right onto the federal agenda.
Nick Palmer show.
Nick Palmer. Again, see, there's two of you, you know. So today was, Al Riley.
He was there yesterday. He was there yesterday.
I was wondering if you could just give us an overview of how the federal agenda is written, like how it needs to be.
Did you guys get the pack sent out to you, the draft?
The email.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure, so I don't jump in. So, a quick overview of the process. Every year for the past probably 7 or 8 years, we have used the federal lobbyists, the same firms, Smith, Dawson, Andrews. Brett Garson is the guy you probably have seen here, although Jim Smith has been here too. This is last year's product. I'll just pass this around so you can take a look at it if you haven't seen this already. This was the final product that was given to congressional staff and members. So if you just want to hand that, and then we also did something new last year. We did a little marketing piece, which I'll circulate this too. Those who went on the trip saw these because we were handing them out. But this just highlights some specific things we talked about: workforce, the transportation, and kind of an overview. And the whole effort for the I don't want to say this is all inclusive, but the reason we hired a federal lobbyist was to have representation out in DC. And initially was to pursue primarily earmarks, because that was kind of the thing to do when we first started. And we were successful. We had several $1 million. Some was for sheriff's laptop, some was for highway projects. Since then, they've done away with earmarks, and now the money is more put into competitive grants and into agencies. So now we're still focused on money, but a different approach to getting money. Instead of just going to members and looking for earmarks on bills, we have gone the last several years into agencies, sometimes deep within agencies, to get information about upcoming grant programs and just advocating for funding of existing federal programs. And I think the important thing is, from Will County's perspective, giving our members, whether they be senators or congressmen, how the actions they take impact Will County. Because a lot of times the congressional office say, what does this do to you guys? And so even though I know the argument is made, NACO argues for CDG or WIA or whatever, they're talking nationally, which I think Jim Lucis has said this before, is some areas of the country, the workforce doesn't work real well. Here, it works pretty well, and so we want to advocate what we're doing with the money, what successes we've had. And last year, because we had new members, we're also educating them about what Will County is all about, because not all of them have the same familiarity as in the past. So that's why this documents are kind of partly educational, to show them how much economic opportunities there are here, and transportation and other issues, so. And like I said, competitive grants are a big focus, so we've been focused on that too, so. So I'm just gonna start going through it, and just give you kind of high level. Here's what our plan is. We're giving you a draft today, so I can give you kind of an overview, you can ask some questions now. We're gonna wait till February to seek full approval, because I'm still working on a few items which I'll touch on at the end. But this gives you a chance to at least hear some about it, review it. If you have questions, you can reach out to me or wait till next month's committee, and then we'll finalize it next month, so. So just jumping right in your packet that you received, the first item is the Will County landfill restrictions. This is getting that term limit removed and hopefully the geographic limitation. Right now we have a 23-year limit, and we can only accept waste from in Will County or communities that are within Will County. That's harming us, and we have a lot of arguments for that. You've probably heard all that, but it's basically limits our ability to collect money from that. We have to set another landfill. We've already had Congressman Foster and Senator Durbin out to the landfill. We have finalized a date and a time for Congressman Kinzinger to come, which this is his district, and we're still hoping to get Senator Kirk's staff out there, so we'll cover all the main players on this, and hopefully we can move forward with that. But that's just a huge thing, both financially for the county. That money helps our budget, and it's also an important environmental thing, because if we have to close the landfill early, we're going to have to site another one, which costs a lot of money. So that's just kind of laying out that case. And beyond just the book, we're obviously acting on that with the members, and they've been fairly responsive so far. Senator Durbin wanted us to make sure we had Congressman Kinzinger up there, and then he was ready to talk more. So we're going to actively pursue that. The second item, stop me if you have any questions too. The second item is Ileana, just expressing kind of what we've expressed in other venues, but why this is an important project, why this is an important regional project. Last time when we went, Lee Goodson, Bob Howard, and I and Brett went to the Federal Highway Administration. They were very interested in this project because of the public-private partnership that's going on, and just because it's two states. So we want to keep this on their radar, because there may be federal funds or implications on this, and because there's a level of interest on this, so we want to keep that in front of them.
Do you know, I'm sorry, really quick, and it's just because of the history, do we know, like, I really would like Judy O'Galley to be at these meetings when we are discussing any of this, because that's not going to happen where we're going to bear. But is Judy at all reached out to you on the federal job about the airport, or?
No, not yet. And the other thing I just mentioned, along with, we've talked about some Ileana meetings, but there, 5 bid teams have put in bids to the state, which shows there's an interest in the private sector. Also, Senator Kirk and Senator Coates did a press conference not too long ago. I know Don Moran attended that. But there is a lot of support among our congressional delegation to see this project move forward too. So
they'll have the short list of those 5 people that submitted a request for qualifications. They'll have a short list of people with statements of qualification. 5 people submit statements of qualification. They'll have that whittled down to 2 or 3 by this Friday.
Why are they going to cut it down?
They just
If they're all qualified.
eliminated.
I'm not sure why. If they said at the beginning of this process, maybe Alicia could say, no.
No, I'm not exactly sure why, and I was going to ask the question to Secretary Schneider yesterday, how they were going to evaluate, the 5 bids that were submitted, and so I'm not sure how they go from 5 to 3.
I think because this thing is going to be, the whole process is kind of wide open as far as how somebody's going to commit and submit a plan to build, operate, this thing for a period of 30 years or 40 years or something, that they want to give them as much flexibility as they can, but they want to make it manageable for their staff to be able to review this stuff. If they get 5 of them back, and there's been all this drawn out process of how they're going to build and finance and operate the road for the next 40 years, maybe it's just too much stuff. So what they indicated was they were going to pick out 2 or 3 of the best qualified ones out of this list, and that they were going to ask to submit bids.
What they do on these 3?
So, items would be.
Next item is agriculture exports. We've highlighted this the last several years because of the number is so huge. In here, in this draft, we have 85 million bushels. I believe the number's higher than that, so we're updating those. But this is an important thing to share with our congressional delegation because that 85, 90 million bushels of grain isn't just coming from Will County, it's coming from the larger region. It's coming from as far away as North Dakota, ships back to Elwood, Joliet to be exported out on trains or barges. So that's a very big economic issue, and we want to continue to highlight that and keep focus on that. So the next item is something new to the agenda this year. It's random assignment evaluation requirement on U.S. Department of Labor discretionary grants. This came from Pat Farah. This is an example of our staff kind of coming up with ideas for the agenda. Apparently, there's new rules in place the last several years as far as when grants come in and eligible applicants, they're vetted, they take all the tests, they do all the things, and then there's this random assessment where they just kick out a sample of, I think she says 30%, for no good reason, etc. They just need to whittle down the list. So some people are qualified, they just get kind of like
They could be some of the best qualified.
could be some of the best, but they're just, because it's a random sample, they're just booted randomly, which we think is a really poor message to send to people, especially if they're eligible and qualified and meet all the requirements and have gone through the process. So we're asking them to revisit that, possibly do away with that, because it just doesn't make sense. So,
Nick, I'm sorry. Continue, but I'm going to interrupt. Okay, that was why I was wondering who authors these different sections, because I read this whole document and that section is written, like it was, to me, very well written. It really explains the problem, and then at the end, you know the position, like we're asking you to use this type of a design. This is what Will County is supporting. And I noticed for a few of the other sections, it was unclear to me at the end what Will County was asking to do or what we were supporting. It was merely stating
Or information. I agree with
information.
that.
And so that was why I was trying to find out who authored it. I was trying to figure out if different people authored it and they wrote in different ways. But to me, a consistent voice where at the end, you're really stating, what are we asking? What are we seeking? What are we hoping for?
Right.
Is good. And this is an example to me, like the landfill is so clear. I
Right.
mean, you really get a history, and we are looking to be allowed to take waste from whoever the county board decides on and for a period of time until it's full. And I think it would be good if each one was written that way.
I agree totally. If you have that one position, even if time gets less, you immediately go to that position
Right.
statement. And then if you're not understanding it, you go back and read everything else.
And yeah, some I walked away with exactly that feeling,
Yeah.
and then others I didn't. And I think it's personally best to have that.
I will look back at it and we'll talk with Brett. I mean, some of them, this is the thing too, and this came up last month. We schedule these meetings, and we will have a consultation with those who are going. Leadership usually determines who goes to these trips, and it's usually a smaller group in recent years just because of the cost. But when you go to these congressional offices, there isn't a lot of time. You're
Yeah,
kind of
so that
rotating. It's
takes-
like a revolving door sometimes, and it's just, that's how it is. I mean, all day long, they're bringing groups in. Some because of relationships we've had with the offices, someone knows the member personally or staff, we get extra time. And sometimes I think we've gotten a lot more time because of those relationships, but you are pretty quick. So this has an eye to streamlining, but sometimes that can be too much, especially for you folks. And if you have specific questions that want more detail, there's a lot of detail behind this, but just keeping it streamlined. But I'm not saying that we need to go back, and I will look to see if we can kind of sharpen the ask on these. Some
I
of
think
them
when
are.
you get to the laptop, the sheriff's laptop, it does a great job of explaining why these are really important, but it never really states what do we want to do. You know,
Right.
Weber Road, we need some federal funds. The laptop never really says what we're hoping for.
Well, and just again to the history, in the past on laptops, for example, we would have said we need $1 million earmarked for laptops, but there are no earmarks anymore. So now it's the ask in that one we need to put is continue to fund college technology grants, which are what's funding this. So that's the ask. So that just needs to be sharpened a little bit. But some of them, there isn't a specific ask to, it's more like we're commenting on the policy and how it impacts. I mean, the ask may be, don't cut the funding like CDBG, or continue to fully fund WIA. But I understand what you're asking, so I will look back with an eye to that and make sure we have some type of ask in the document and it's flushed out a little bit better.
And even the Affordable Health Care Act, where they talk about the situations that can come up with public health, it doesn't, I know there isn't an ask, but it definitely states the position of Will County and the concern is.
Right. Okay.
I think there always should be one sentence. One says what you want. One sentence. Once you get past the first sentence, then you lose them. There's one sentence that says what you're asking for, or what you're in favor of.
Yeah.
At least they get that, if they don't look at anything else.
And again, just to kind of elaborate on it, when we're in these meetings, we usually come in, there's the pleasantries, and then you get to the business. And depending on the member or the office, we're gonna target certain things, either what we know they're interested in, where they're gonna probably be most responsive to, or where we think they can have the most impact. And Suzanne and Lee can explain, Herbie can say this too. We strategize sometimes before those meetings and say, okay, what are we asking for? What's our talking points? I mean, when we're out there, we meet beforehand and kind of go over the book, and here's where we're meeting today, and so some of that comes into play, and it's beyond the book, because the book is almost like a business card. We're giving to them to start the conversation, but then we're going to expound, because again, and not to take anything away from the congressional members, but they're going to say, here, staff person, here, take this book, and work with, Reed over here, who's my specialist on, municipal bonds or something. And that's where the federal lobbyist really has been helpful, because they do lots and lots of work with the staff people outside of these 20-minute meetings or whatever, all throughout the year. So, I mean, I had a couple of calls yesterday from some of the offices on particular issues we're getting information. I get your guys' point.
No, because it's true. In fact, it's almost like a skit, like of coming in. It's almost like you're going in, you're going to talk about this, the highlight is going to be, and you'll going into these offices, they either, you could tell they read it, and they were kind of on it, and they did a little, or they were highlighted, and I'm not saying reading it per se, it's staff going, this is what they're coming in.
Yeah.
Or not, and they're just looking, going, okay, that's great, well, Connie, thank you for coming.
But that's what makes it even better to have that, because if they do open it and if one line continues to hit them, at least they get that audited. So it gives you the opportunity to go in
They're very
and talk
few and far
about
between,
it.
you read it.
And the book is our gift to them.
Right.
They pass our gift on.
And it's beautiful.
I still am
Yeah.
curious who authors this, is it one
Well,
person or different people
It's
writing
not
different
just one
parts?
person. It's
Okay.
Brett Garson. He does a lot of the initial. Well, he and I meet with and have in the past. Some of this is just a continuation of previous year's work, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every year. But we meet with the sheriff's office, or we get something from the sheriff's office. We get something from EMA or whomever. We research it. Brett researches it and goes through where there's asks for money. Like on the sheriff's things, we have the laptops and the complex. The complex is a little harder to fund from federal money because they don't really fund bricks and mortar, but they do fund technology. So Brett will go back, if we don't already know, say, okay, here's funding places we can get money for this. And then we draft some, like the WIA stuff, Pat Farrell worked with Brett on the language, but it's not just one author.
Okay,
But I mean, ultimately, Brett is kind of the filter, and I work with him to kind of polish it up. I mean, I'm working personally on a couple of the items that he's not as familiar with, the local issues that I'll touch on. But, so it's a compilation of efforts, but ultimately Brett is kind of vetting it against what he knows, because he's the expert, that's what we have.
So for the sheriff's facility, is there not really like an ask or a stated position in there because there's not really one to have, but we're just trying to communicate to them that we really want to be able to build this? Or is it more just like letting them know that this is a goal of ours?
I mean, in some ways, the federal agenda, I would argue, is kind of a stating of our priorities too. So it's saying this is a priority project if there is funding available, if we can find funding somewhere else. Or if there's a grant, it kind of lets the members know if they see grants, because there's thousands and thousands of grants we get every, postings for grants. they say, oh, here's a grant, this kind of lines up with Will County, let's shoot it to them and see if they want to apply for it. So it's in some ways,
That makes a lot more sense to me than why it's different. from
we still
different
could
things.
probably sharpen this and make,
No,
to
you're
your
being
point.
modest. Not everyone does this. Like when
Yeah.
we went, last when we were there, we ran into Naperville Chamber, and they were going over our federal book, they're like, we're copying this. Can we have this? Like, we're gonna do this next time. Nick and all of them do an amazing job with that, so.
It's a lot of work to get, I mean, you
But
really
not
have-
everyone does that.
You have this little window of opportunity, if you're not ready to talk, and just as an example, this was a good example, a couple of years ago, when Judy Bigger was a congressman, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we were talking about Homeland Security, and I forget the exact facts when the screen's up, but Lake, DuPage, and Will are 3 of the largest counties, like in the top 10 in the country, who are part of a UASI, which is an urban area security initiative, basically Homeland Security money. All that money goes into the city of Chicago and Cook County. We have asked them, we've met with the head of that group, who told us they're not gonna give us any money because they don't have to, and their mayor would fire the guy if he gave us any money. But we went to Judy Bigger's office and we came up with this fact and said, you know, you represent 2 of the counties that are in the top 10 that are in UASI don't get any money. That got their staff's attention and they were on it. Now, they weren't able to do anything as, you know, nothing has changed dramatically as of yet, but we're continuing to fight that fight. And some of our current congressmen are still focused on that and see that as a problem. So that's sometimes, but it was like in the course of a 10-minute meeting, maybe, we, you know, said hello, did whatever, and then we got down to business, and you kind of have to be prepared to have that conversation. But it's
That's so
it's
helpful.
packing a lot
Thank you.
into like the back of a book cover, you know, it's like, what is it all about? Here's what it's about, so.
No more questions, Ben.
No more, I'm done. I
So,
still have some.
there's still, well, you may have more, so.
Yes, class.
So, yeah, see me after class. Okay, tax exempt municipal bonds, this is something that, you've probably received emails from Smith Dawson on. This is an ongoing issue related to tax reform. This is a real issue because for municipalities and counties, when you borrow money, this is a huge, incentive to borrow money, and if you don't have this, it makes it more difficult. So, this is kind of a national topic of discussion and kind of working its way through the process, so. And there's been, I told a story, but there's some, because of changes in leadership, like Max Walkus, who was the chairman of the Finance Committee in the Senate, he's becoming ambassador to China, so that's gonna delay some of this, so there may not be a lot of these issues you're gonna find if you've been here a few years, they're the same issues, because like we has been being reauthorized for I think 10 years now, and every year we go and advocate. The good thing is they haven't changed it negatively, but they haven't changed it positively either, so. Next item is the Marketplace Fairness Act. Again, this is a big issue. This is related to online sales and getting taxes back to the local entities. When you're buying stuff online, it's convenient, but the taxes don't come back to your local community, so they're missing out. When we were with Senator Durbin last time, he did meet with us, but immediately left our meeting to go to the floor to advocate for this, because this is a big, big deal, and it's a lot of money that municipalities, counties miss out on, so we're keeping that on our radar, because it helps us if we get that right. I'm gonna move quick, so stop me if you have questions. Next item, we have the airport piece, just to kind of keep that on the radar. We can talk to our members about, I was talking to Congressman Foster's office yesterday. They asked about the meeting at the airport, how to go, what can we do by Lillian, so they want to be engaged with us.
One thing we did suggest yesterday is that, if we get in to visit FAA, that we emphasize to them that the necessity of expediting the air study process and the EIS phase 2 process. Evidently, they're getting some resistance from a certain mayor to slow that process down.
And the other thing, there's been many pieces to this, is some of you know, not only does our county board delegation let it go, the chambers go, Naperville Chamber, the Joliet Chamber, CED goes, and they sometimes do similar visits to the, obviously our congressional delegation, but they have been, a business labor coalition group has been to the FAA in the past. It's been a little while, so I think they are trying to plan a visit with the administrator there. There was just a big breakthrough group meeting in Chicago the other day, and one of the, I forget his title, but one of the guys from the Department of Transportation was here, connected with Executive Walsh, and they're trying to set up a meeting to them. So we may not cover every piece just because there's only so much time and getting whatever meetings we can set up, but CED is covering some of these same topics kind of on our behalf or as part of the Will County delegation. The chambers hit some of these same issues. So, and the Joliet Chamber, I know in the past, has contacted our office to get copies of our legislative agenda and or pieces that they want, or we want them to focus on if they have the opportunity. So there is some collaboration. Next piece is just a small, very short piece on the Affordable Care Act and its impact to us and the Community Health Center. This has been where in the past we've had adjustments to our funding, which has been helpful to get additional dollars back to. We still think we should get more, and we're continuing to advocate for that. So this may be beefed up a little bit more because it is a little short, but that is an ongoing topic that you'll probably always see in our agendas. CDBG, this is an example of what I was talking about before. NACO focuses on this. They do press conferences on the steps of the Capitol. We've been out there for NACO. But there's also a local implication when our congressmen or senators say, well, what does this mean locally? We tell them that it's leveraging 4.4 to 1 ratio of dollars. Every dollar is invested. We're leveraging other monies, and it's not just in the, Joliet's and the Lockports. There's been some projects up, I think, in Homer and some other areas years ago, but there's still other areas where this helps, and some of that was helpful in the Ridgewood project, which was a major project we undertook a few years ago. Next thing is authorizations. These are bills that are kind of up for reauthorization. Things like the transportation bill, MAP 21. This is a pretty spelled out piece in our agenda because we're talking about specific things we would like to see funded in the bills. Transportation alternative programs, which are alternatives to just building roads. Talking about bicycle paths, pedestrian crossings, freight components, flexibility for local governments. So when we're doing projects that the NEPA requirements, or which are the federal requirements to build roads, have been streamlined a little bit, but we want to keep focus on that. And dedicated funding for the Highway Trust Fund. So this, you can read through it, but it highlights a lot of specific points related to the transportation bill. The next item is the WRDA, or Water Resource Development Act. This is one of these projects that's been, or reauthorization that's been coming for a long, long time. At present, it's been approved by the Senate and the House, different versions. So back to your social studies class, this is in conference committee, and hopefully they're going to actually get it done this year. And they're hoping this first quarter is, but as you'd imagine, people are trying to cut deals for their own districts, and that's stalling us. Because currently, because there's no earmarks, they try to avoid putting specific projects in the bills. Some members want to go back to that because they're not seeing their districts get what they want. And to me, I'll just share this with you guys, is the mix is if you don't have earmarks, then you're pushing it all into the executive branch, and that's where some people are saying, well, why are we letting agency people in Washington decide what projects are best? Why don't, as members, at least we knew what was needed in our district, and we could advocate. Now they're trying to do a hybrid of that where agencies make recommendations, they vet the projects, and then they send it to the Congress, and Congress approves it. To me, that's kind of a roundabout way of going back to earmarks, because then Congress says, we don't like that project, we like this one, here's my project, but this is all to avoid things like the bridge to nowhere or whatever. The thing is, Will County, we're proud, every project we put forward, we're proud of. We're not going to be ashamed if it's not like under the cover of darkness. They're all legitimate projects that have returns on investment. So
no bridges and no man land.
We have bridges, but they're two somewhere.
But at least if they're done in Congress, instead of in an agency, it's transparent.
Yeah.
People see it, and
Right.
if they don't like it, they can toss somebody, right?
Right. And this is going to be an ongoing debate because there's certain people in both parties want earmarks to come back or some form of them, and just how you vet it publicly and make it more transparent. Because with the earmarks, when they did away with it, some people just said, well, we'll put earmarks back in, but you're going to put your name to it. So if there's a project that's a bad project, your name's going to be all over as a member, and you're going to take the blame for it. But that didn't happen. So. Next item is Workforce Investment Act. Like I said, this is, I guess, maybe it's 1990, maybe it's 1990, but it's been a long, long time. Pat Fair talks about this every year. She goes out and advocates. Brett Garson and Jim Smith have gotten us in to see the highest levels of the Department of Labor which is amazing that we get into those meetings. But our focus, several of our members, Don and Speaker Brooks, are on the board with Jim Bustos. We want business-led boards, public-private partnership, which is required, but we do, I think, a very good job of engaging the private sector, letting us do locally what's best for us, because what's good for Chicago or DuPage may not be good for us. But we do have regional collaborations on a lot of projects, so we want to highlight that and show why it needs to stay the way it is, so we can continue that. And there's some grids of how much money we get, just some history on it, and what the community leverage. You invest $1, you get X amount of dollars back, so that's in there. Weber Road project, obviously a major project in the northern part of the county. We've tried, as far as road projects, to break them up. Before we had basically 3 congressmen, two was the 13th and the 11th. Now with 6, it's a little harder, but we try to highlight projects in different districts, so we're just doing north and kind of southeast or east. This Weber Road is a big project, obviously, in the Laramie Road corridor. These are huge projects. We work with the highway department. They give us all the data. We'll have maps and things in the final presentation, but this just highlights the need, and we can spill it over from just roads to these corridors. The Weber Road and Laramie are going to be major county development corridors because they're county roads. So that's those. Integrated justice, we've been working with the Judicial Committee, but this we want to just highlight because this is a good example of collaboration among county agencies. There is funding available, which we'll probably have to put an ask in this, but there is funding through some of the Department of Justice grant programs. So we're just highlighting this because this is when we've been in DC before. Agencies talk about, when you're talking about competitive grants, where are you collaborating, where are you working together? They would much rather give money to a collaborative effort than just this silo over here, this silo over there. So this we just want to highlight and talk about. And this is something that could potentially be funded with Homeland Security money if we got any of that. So, law enforcement complex we've already touched on, but this is just, as we all know, capital improvements is dealing with this, but we want to keep this out in front, highlight some of the needs, and again, this could also be a COPS technology grant for the technology that goes inside, or Homeland Security money if we can. So that's that piece, the in-car cameras and squads, or laptops rather. We did the earmark I mentioned a few years ago for the laptops. We've been paying for cameras out of JAG money, which is an annual formula appropriation. So we've made progress, but there's a lifespan for those laptops. I'm assuming Nate could tell us that there's probably a need for replacing those in not too distant future. So we want to keep that on the agenda. And highlight the need for that, because that fits into from the street and the officer into our court system and the prosecution, back out on the street to probation, whatever. That's kind of a circle of life in the criminal justice system, and that's really important. So the other things, and then I'm just going to touch on the things we're still working on, and then I'll take any questions. There's a project which I've talked about briefly before, a Humboldt Bridge project, which is from the Union Pacific facility, waste management on Laramie Road, across the Des Plaines to connecting with your Hollywood Casino to Humboldt Road and I-80. This is a major project that has been talked about for a long time, as far as a way to alleviate traffic from Route 53, which would reclaim that road for a lot of the local residents, get all those trucks off, and just make it more efficient for trucks to get out of those intermodal facilities. In the past, there's been a lot of talk, not a lot of movement. In recent months, there's been a lot of movement, and there's been interest from the private sector to move forward with this, where it could potentially be largely funded by private investors. But because it's private investors, we're not privy to all that information at this point. Some of that's probably, what's the word? Privileged information, or whatever. But that is moving forward. We're going to highlight the concept of that and what it means to the region. We discussed this when we were with the Federal Highway Administration too, just as an aside, and they were very excited because the congestion relief, but also it leads to more economic development in the intermodal facilities. So they were supportive of that, and that ask there would be TIFIA loans, which are low interest loans, or Tiger grants possibly. If we were going to go the federal funding route. If we were gonna just do private money, then you don't have to do that, but you still have environmental reviews and things like that. So that's gonna be highlighting that, because that's still fluid, I'm waiting on some more information, but we'll have a draft for you for next month.
Nick, where's that land impact? Does that interfere with the expansion of the waste management's landfill on their way?
No. No, it's to the west of Laraway's facility there. It's actually cuts through part of the paintball park. So the paintball place, you know, would probably have to be relocated somewhere else, but that can go a lot of places. Just so, but there's waste management has been involved previously of dedicating some right away there. So they at least have some awareness of this. Second issue that I'm going to bring back to you is related to nuclear storage issues. Don Moran brought this idea up, so I'm researching with some of the experts in the field on how we store materials, and specifically if we can get it nailed down, is there was, and maybe Don, I can throw it all you, but there's a facility across from Dresden where this was planned before and never really came to fruition. But
General Electric brought in a bunch of used fuel in the 70s to develop a process to make the material somewhat inert, so it can be carried or whatever. The process didn't work. Argonne has proved the technology in the laboratory that would recycle fuel and take it from a half-life of 100,000 years down to 20 years, which means we would have to still store it for like 200 years. But it actually takes the existing fuel, the used fuel that we have in this country. We have 12% of the used fuel in the whole country is right here in Illinois. The vast majority of that is near the Dresden station, which was the first operating commercial nuclear reactor in the country. And it would recycle this fuel, burn it in a different kind of reactor. Right now, the fuel rods, when they're used, we've used 5% of the energy out of them. The new process would burn 95% of the energy out of the rods. And it reduces the half-life down to 20 years, so we wouldn't have to store this stuff for eons, so we have no technology to store it for. Right now, the dry cast system that they use, they store the rods in the fuel pool for over 7 years to cool them off. They put them in a concrete and steel dry cast. They store them on a ramp, and the lifespan of that cast is designed for 100 years, and after that, the rods have to be pulled out of there and put in a new cast every 100 years for the next several 100,000 years. There's money that's been received from the utilities for a federal repository, Yucca Mountain, which doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And that's truly not the real solution anyway. We have to store this stuff there for hundreds of thousands of years. If we use this fuel up, we can get rid of it. We can make it go away. And there was a project that was proposed by Congresswoman Helgerson. It was a joint venture between Argonne National Laboratories, General Electric, and Exelon. And there was a meeting out at Dresden Station where the Assistant Secretary of Energy came out. Argonne National Laboratories was there, Exelon, GE, and they talked about what this process would be. And then when Congresswoman Helgerson left office, this thing kind of fell by the wayside. Now the cost per kilowatt doesn't make it commercially viable, but if they take some of this repository money and augment it and do this as a joint venture with Argonne and GE and Exelon, it could be a viable process, and it could be the technology that proves how to get rid of all of this stuff that we've already created. So we've talked to Congressman Foster, we've talked to Senator Durbin, and so we've got some traction on this thing. So maybe we can make it happen, maybe, or at least we can get the conversation started.
And that's, yeah, the ask, I think, would be, that's the challenging part, what exactly are we asking for? But I think, in talking to some of the nuclear guys through Exelon, that at the very least, kind of highlighting what we have, and there is these storage issues that are a concern for all of us, since we have so many nuclear plants. But if the more specific ask may be that Argonne directly to work with the nuclear companies on the storage issue, and if they can use some of that money, direct some of that money through legislation to pilot a program or something to see what can be done to safely storage and reuse the spent fuels that haven't totally been spent. So we're going to come back with something that hopefully would not be too controversial, because some people get it.
The environmentalist would generally say, we don't want to do this, not in our backyard, but This stuff is already in our
It's stored
backyard.
in.
It's in our backyard, and it's gonna be in our backyard for the next couple 100,000 years. Here's a way that we can actually take care of the problem and solve the problem. We don't have to bring it in from anyplace else. We've got it. It's already here. So, yes.
It's an exciting prospect, a way of getting rid of nuclear waste. Do we have some kind of proven rate of use or expending this, where we can give them a prediction as to how fast it can be used up?
Right now, it's cheaper
Uh-huh.
to mine yellow cake uranium in Canada, process it into fuel, and burn it in a conventional kind of reactor.
Mhm.
Okay, it's cheaper to do that than it is to recycle the used fuel into the new fuel that will be burned in a new kind of reactor.
Yeah.
So that adds to the problem of trying to pay for it commercially. It's hard to pay for that.
Yeah.
But the technology has been proven in the laboratory
Uh-huh.
that this will work. Congressman Foster, who's a scientist and used to work at Fermilab, told me with the existing stockpile of used fuel in the United States,
Mhm.
at the current rate of power generation by nuclear power plants, it would take us 1,000 years to burn up the existing used fuel. Okay, so we wouldn't have to mine any more yellow cake. We could use the existing stockpiles of this bad stuff that we've got and turn it into something that's much less bad.
And with further development of technology, you might even be able to use it in less than 1,000 years perhaps.
Well, if it turns out to this day, what they want to do is put a pilot plant in, not a
Yeah.
full-scale, full-size nuclear reactor like a Braidwood unit or a Dresden unit.
Yeah.
It'd be a smaller scale reactor, and they could prove the technology and a full-size reactor instead of, what they do to create nuclear fission laboratories. I think is they point a bunch of laser beams at one little spot, and they can squish the little neutrons and stuff around, and they can do things in a laboratory. They want to prove this in a real scale, make an operational plant that can actually do it. So,
That's really set up a future legislative science class.
I know, I was like, all right, boys, I'm gonna have to draw a little line here in the sand.
The reason Illinois though is unique is, one, is we have Braidwood, Dresden, which is in close proximity. There are other nuclear plants obviously in Illinois, we're the largest concentration.
the South Station and Braidwood Station are within a few miles of Dresden, actually. So.
Right, yeah, and it's just the issue in the past with Yucca Mountain was the transportation. People don't, I mean, they're sitting on these sites, like Don said, it's already there. It's just, some people get freaked out by moving them anywhere, but if you can move it a short distance and deal with it and make it useful and kind of use up its half-life, that's good.
Well, there's going to be danger involved.
Right,
in moving,
right.
could be
But in this particular case, with the stump that's at GE and the stump that's at Dresden Station, it goes one road into the backside of Heidelberg Lake. They can make one secure site, they don't have to move anything to prove the technology.
So,
Are you-
so that last item is just I'm going to bring back to you is EMA. We've had them in the past. I received some of that information after the packets went out, but I will be including some things related to our EOC downstairs, and that kind of goes in the umbrella of Homeland Security money. We're hoping to get some money to fund some of those efforts because although you don't always see it every time there's a storm, if there is something at a nuclear power plant or whatever, EMA is activated. They're working with local law enforcement, first responders, so we're trying to fund it. So, last thing is just the targeted date. We haven't firmed up this, but we're looking at the week of April 7th, which is, I think the 7th is a Monday, so possibly the 7th, 8th, and 9th would be when people would go. Ideally fly out on the 7th, do dinner, and kind of plan our strategy for the 8th, meet all day the 8th, and possibly have the 9th for meetings, and then fly back. But this, just so committee members know, leadership works together, decides who's going to go on the trip, and this year we're going to have a conversation specifically about who we're meeting with and what the strategy is beforehand. But sometimes it's the day we're arriving and they're getting final confirmation in some of the meetings and some of we've been scheduled while we're there. I think the last time Holbrook was scheduled during the day while we're there. Maybe I don't know, one of them was last minute. So I'm available now or anytime for questions or.
Well, no, and the big thing, because we're not gonna have the same thing that happened on the local, the big is gonna have any questions, now. And I'm gonna make sure I make some calls to make sure.
Can I ask you questions?
Who's gonna say?
Don's recess day after class.
I'm good.
Better to ask
But-
the committee, because then we can give you a full
We
answer.
can-
Doing the full board meeting is harder to answer at that point.
And so next month is when you're gonna want,
We would like action next month, assuming everything
Okay.
goes.
well, I will make a call, to a couple folk that if there is anyone to come to committee next, so we can go ahead and clinch this for
And we
next
say
month.
that Thursday at a county board meeting.
Yes.
You and Bob Howard gonna be there?
Well, I'll report.
Okay,
I will
okay.
go ahead and report, and I will,
Make
oh yeah,
that.
I will highlight that. I will have a yellow highlighter in the air of making sure, and I will personally make some phone calls, so. Okay, great, well, thank you. There's any other new business? No, not executive? No announcement, because we've been here for like 8 hours, so. I'm,
Motion to adjourn.
second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.